Hello everyone, and welcome to the 250th episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring Tramell from Basic Instinct. This character has become a legendary figure in cinematic history, and not just because of an iconic scene she's in that's often passed around the internet, but because she's one of the most bone-chilling villainesses ever created. Hiding behind a beautiful facade, Catherine is nothing short of a beast, one that any of us would loathe to encounter, and who all should fear is the diabolical creature that she proves herself to be throughout this story. And in this video, we're going to talk about what makes her one of the most well-written and best-performed villains that we've ever seen. Before we continue though, I'd like to note that there is a second Basic Instinct film that this character appears in, and I will be mentioning a part of it in this video. But that film is terrible to say the least, so we'll largely be ignoring what happens there while we discuss her character in this episode, just so you're aware. Now without further ado, let's begin. A heightened level of intelligence is often seen as a gift by most people, and rightfully so, but some people end up proving to be too smart for their own good. Catherine Tramell was born into a life that most of us can only dream of having, a life of wealth and comfort in a beautiful environment where a young child is given every opportunity to succeed. And she did, graduating magna cum laude from Berkeley with a dual major in literature and psychology in 1983, afterwards becoming a successful crime novelist who only did so for the sake of it, considering the massive fortune she inherited from her parents after they tragically passed away in a boating accident in 1979, with assets at the time this story begins valued at $110 million, and that's in early 90s dollars. However, sometimes having everything in the world handed to you on a silver platter isn't enough for a young and curious mind. And sometimes, when that curious mind grows bored, it can conjure up some horrendously sinister thoughts. The fire in the fireplace is so mesmerizing, but how would it look decorating a house? People make funny noises when they get hurt. Even when I hurt them, maybe I can make them do other things if I hurt them. That sure is a pretty bird. I wonder what it looks like on the inside. Now, the manifestations of thoughts like these in children are often born from a stressful or abusive environment, but in the absence of these factors, boredom and loneliness can also cause a mind to develop in strange ways. And while we never really learn about Catherine experiencing any of these things in her childhood, by all accounts, she must have, and she must have had terrible thoughts akin to the ones I just described to you. For the curious and brilliant mind of Catherine Tramell conjured up a harrowing thought that no well-adjusted person would ever entertain, especially a girl in her early to late teens. Could I get away with it if I killed my parents? Now, how do we know that Catherine had this thought and that she's the one who killed her parents? After all, I did just mention that her parents died in a boating accident. Well, this entire film is all about us viewers slowly discovering the how and why of the many sick crimes that Catherine has committed over the course of her life. Crimes that she works into the various novels she writes that serve as both hidden in plain sight trophies and proof of how valuable her research into murder and mayhem has been. And one of those novels is centered around a young boy who kills his parents by making their deaths look like a plane accident using a plane that they owned. A boy who did so just to see if he could. And considering the plots of most of Catherine's other novels are derived from crimes she's personally committed, it's all but confirmed by the existence of this book that Catherine is in fact the one who killed her parents, and that their deaths were no accident. Now, there are plenty more crimes Catherine committed for us to discuss, and we'll get to them shortly, but I felt it necessary to mention the murder of her parents before we started talking about anything else, not just to establish what little background information we're given for Catherine, but to give us an idea of why Catherine does what she does to keep in mind as we move forward. And that's because she's a thrill seeker, a rule breaker, a limit pusher, and an obsessive and narcissistic psychopath who loves toying with people, possessing them, and punishing them when they refuse to be possessed. A person who wants to challenge herself and see what she's capable of doing and what she's capable of getting away with. And as gruesome and sadistically brilliant as her crimes are, it's not the crimes Catherine commits that makes her such a tantalizing villain, but how she commits them and the tools that she uses to do so. As I mentioned in the introduction, there is a Basic Instinct too, but it's pretty bad and not even worth watching despite its decent cast. So save yourself some trouble and consider that you've watched it vicariously through me. I mean, hell, even the director admitted that he knew during the filming process that it was going to be a bad movie, but he needed the paycheck, so he signed up for the project. And if that doesn't tell you enough, I don't know what will. However, there is one thing that this film gives us that helps us further understand who Catherine is, and that's a psychological analysis of Catherine that's made by the protagonist of the film, Dr. Glass, early in its runtime. In a courtroom scene where Catherine is being judged for the crime of murdering her most recent boyfriend, Dr. Glass gives us the following observation. Inside, she vacillates between godlike omnipotence and a sense that she doesn't exist, which is intolerable. Her behavior is driven by a risk addiction, a compulsive need to prove to herself that she can take risks and survive dangers that other people can't, especially the subsequent encounters with the police or the powers that be. The greater the risk, the greater the proof of her omnipotence and her existence really, and the only limit for her is her own death. Later on, Dr. Glass also states that for her, everything is a weapon and everyone is an enemy, and the accuracy of these statements cannot be understated. Throughout this story, Catherine shows herself to be confident, conniving, and utterly without any mercy or remorse, a woman who plays with the lives of men and women as a child plays with Legos. She's a cat in human flesh, and the whole world is her ball of yarn. And with her massive intellect and deep understanding of human behaviors and desires, she is able to flawlessly maneuver around anyone who she targets or who gets in her way. A coy remark and a nonchalant attitude are as deadly as the sharpest of knives, and the wit and cunning of a woman who knows exactly what she wants and how to get it can pierce skulls more efficiently than any bullet ever could. A woman who has taken the noble profession of psychology and transformed it into one of the deadliest weapons in her arsenal. She knows how to read people. The secrets of the inner workings of humanity fully unlocked by careful study, observation, and research into what makes each of us tick. She probes the minds of her victims like a pig nosing through the earth for precious truffles, hitting her mark every time and molding you into her perfect plaything, like a sculptor molds clay. And in combination with her substantial beauty, she knows just what to say and what to do to keep you hanging onto her every word. A slight bite of her lip, a long penetrating gaze, a sly smile that men and women alike have died for, and a sultry seductiveness that radiates from her every movement, all serve to put a spell on you as she bathes you in the poison that are her words. She's mysterious and mesmerizing, a beautiful enigma that looks, sounds, and feels more delicious than you could have ever imagined. A creature that can cause your senses to go haywire as you struggle to discern whether or not you're dealing with a person taken straight from your deepest fantasies, or a monster that has emerged from its cave to drag you back clawing and screaming into its domain. It's all of these things that have made Catherine Tramell into one of the most effective and unsettling villains ever conceived. The ultimate seductress, whose calculating mind ensures that she could murder your mother right in front of you and convince you that you're the one who pulled the trigger. And what's perhaps most astonishing about all the evil acts she has committed is how far-reaching and intricate each of her plans to accomplish them were. We don't know what kind of planning went into murdering her parents, but we can assume that it was thorough and intricate, considering she was able to make their deaths look like a boating accident. Something that isn't easy to accomplish, especially for a teenage girl. When we're first introduced to Catherine, it's as a suspect in the murder of a man she was dating, retired rock star Johnny Boz. We learn that Catherine's latest novel is centered around a rock star being murdered by his lover after he was tied up to a bed and stabbed to death with an ice pick, the same exact way that Johnny Boz was murdered. Using her book as an alibi, though, Catherine is able to convince investigators that she wouldn't be dumb enough to murder someone in the exact same way someone was murdered in one of her books, something she seemingly confirms by passing a polygraph test. And with no prior convictions to be found, the officials in charge of the investigation were given no reason to suspect her involvement any further. As diabolically impressive as that is, it's what she does to Nick in an effort to make him the subject of her next novel, and the lengths she goes to orchestrate the murder of Elizabeth Garner, that shows us just how deranged Catherine truly is. After Catherine murdered her parents, the next person to fall by her hands was her counselor in college, a man by the name of Dr. Noah Goldstein, a man who was murdered the same way Boz was, and a murder that occurred only a year after her parents' death. As he was her counselor, it's possible that Dr. Goldstein ended up learning a little too much about Catherine and her fractured psyche, and so she seduced him and disposed of him, gaining in the process her signature and preferred method of disposing of her chosen victims. While this act would spark inspiration for Catherine in that regard, it would be her brief relationship with the future Dr. Elizabeth Garner, who at the time went by the name Lisa Hoberman, that would begin a decade-long plot that would result in the murders of 6 people. You see, Elizabeth was only experimenting with her sexuality when she had her fling with Catherine, afterwards deciding that being with a woman just wasn't for her, and ending things with her. Catherine had become obsessed with her though, possibly because she, as a woman who was used to getting whatever she wanted, didn't this time around. Something new and terrifying for her that caused her to fixate on Elizabeth to the point of copying her appearance and stalking her incessantly for quite some time. At some point though, Catherine stopped, but that didn't mean she was done with her. Oh no, far from it, for Catherine learned something about herself in the face of this denial of her wants, that she was unwilling to let anyone or anything go once she had declared them to be hers, and if she couldn't have them, then nobody could. A similar sort of turmoil must have happened with Catherine's next victim, a former middleweight contender by the name of Manuel Vasquez, who was her fiancé at the time, as Manuel was killed in the ring in 1984. And while it is possible that he died due to a sports-related accident, knowing Catherine, it's more likely that Manuel either slighted her in some way, or that she had grown tired of him and paid off his opponent to take him down. But that's still nothing compared to what Catherine had in store for Elizabeth. 5 or 6 years prior to the events of this film, Elizabeth's husband was shot and killed by a random act of violence on the street, a drive-by shooting with seemingly no motive that was never solved. It's never explicitly stated, but we can assume that this mystery shooter was in fact Catherine out to get her revenge on Elizabeth, tormenting her by taking her soulmate from her. But torment isn't enough for a woman like Catherine, for when she sets out to punish someone for going against her own desires, total destruction of their lives is the only thing that can satisfy her. So for years, Catherine stood by until the right moment came along to exact her revenge on Elizabeth, waiting to take her out in a way worthy of her next bestseller. Enter Detective Nick Curran, a man who had substance abuse issues involving alcohol and cocaine, who accidentally shot 2 innocent bystanders on a case whilst high, something that he had been acquitted for, and something that the internal affairs officer in charge of his case, Officer Nielsen, loved to remind him of by frequently referring to him as Shooter. But more importantly, it's something he was also required to discuss with his internal affairs appointed psychologist, Dr. Elizabeth Garner, a woman that he had become romantically involved with. Thus, Nick became the perfect conduit for Catherine's long overdue revenge against Elizabeth, and finding in Nick the malleable individual she would need to create a blood-soaked story filled with romance, intrigue, and death, Catherine ends up purchasing several residences in Nick's jurisdiction to ensure that the future investigation into Boz's murder would fall into his hands. And once it does, she does what she does best, seduces him so expertly in spite of his suspicions about her that he falls totally and hopelessly in love with her. From the very first moment they meet, it's a game of cat and mouse, with Nick chasing her through winding mountain roads at high speeds, discovering the depths of her knowledge about him due to her purchasing his file from Nielsen, and all the lurid sexual contact they enjoy with each other. Fully ingrained in his mind and pulling every last string attached to his body, Catherine is able to make it so Nick becomes steadily more discredited as he continues to conduct this seemingly wild goose chase to take down Catherine. And even more so when Catherine murders Nielsen the day he confronts him about selling his file to her, and he ends up indirectly causing the death of one of Catherine's lovers, Roxy, after she jealously tries to run him down in her car. As time goes on, and Nick begins to make more connections between Elizabeth and the crimes committed in this story and before it, he's forced to suspect Elizabeth as the true culprit here, in the absence of any real evidence against Catherine, slowly coming to view her as the stalker that Catherine initially claimed she was. And at the time he truly entertains this notion, the woman who's murdered not just a retired rock star, and not just Nielsen, but his best friend Gus, a man who bled out in the elevator from multiple stab wounds after he'd chosen to follow a lead on Elizabeth to a fictitious apartment when he learned that she shared an office with Boz's psychiatrist. And as Elizabeth walks towards him with his gun drawn, she reaches for her keys, and Nick shoots. The shooter come full circle to be the final instrument in Catherine's murderous symphony, a blonde wig on the stairs, and an SFPD jacket seemingly confirming that Elizabeth was imitating Catherine and trying to ruin her life all along. The final scene shows Catherine and Nick coming together one last time, with her telling Nick that she loses everybody and that she doesn't want to lose him, and Nick, still suspicious of her role in all this, choosing to forego all that in the face of the overwhelming feelings he has about her. And as they lay in post-coital bliss, we find Catherine reaching for an ice pick hidden under the bed for our final scene, confirmation of her role as mastermind of everything that occurred in this film, and the woman who would bring the ultimate end to the detective featured in her latest book. In the second film, we learn that Catherine continues to live as she always has, and she does so right up until the end of it, where we see her walking away to parts unknown. But with everything we've learned about her throughout this video, what is there to say about Catherine Tramell? Monstrously intelligent, and as insidious as they come, Catherine was a young woman who through unknown circumstances came to embody the worst traits of a psychopath and a narcissist, using her beauty and her wit to orchestrate nearly a dozen murders just to see if she could, and to explore the darker parts of life to give her the excitement she craved. Manipulative, calculating, and tactical, Catherine was able to pull off plans years in the making flawlessly, so flawlessly that she could walk into police stations and courthouses with full confidence that whatever the powers that be had on her, she could beat. And she always did. However, that's only half of the brilliance of Catherine's villainy. It's the way in which she expertly carried out those plans that we find much of the horror of her character. A vile seductress who was so effective at ensnaring men and women alike in her web that she could very well be considered one of the greatest and most mesmerizing manipulators in all of cinematic history. A woman who, if she so wished, could have very well held the entire world in her grasp. As horrid as Catherine was, though, is there any sympathy to be found for her character? Was she a woman trying to fit in and love like any other, who only wanted the best out of life? One who was trying her hardest, but failing each time due to her flaws? No, I don't think so. For Catherine, by all accounts, is as evil as they come. However, it is interesting to note that there were two people that Catherine possibly truly cared for. Those being her lover Roxy and her friend Hazel, two women who both murdered people in their lives seemingly at random, and who Catherine had supposedly come into contact with for research so she could use their stories in future novels. Now, it could be that Catherine didn't just keep these women around to use them for literary purposes. It could be that she made relationships with them because they were the only people that she could truly relate to. Women who had also desired to commit evil for their own selfish reasons that were able to connect with Catherine in a way no one else could. And so when Roxy perished after her attempted murder of Nick, that may have been the only genuine display of emotion we ever received from Catherine. A deep mourning for a person close to her that she felt a true connection to. However, that means little in the face of her crimes. And when it comes down to it, Catherine is certainly a villain, and a magnificent one at that. One who greets you with a smile and a kiss, and says goodbye with restraints and an ice pick. And out of all the villainesses out there, Catherine Tramell may very well earn a spot as one of the greatest of all time. A woman straight out of your wildest dreams, and a nightmarish example of pure evil. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope you've enjoyed. What are your thoughts on Catherine? Did I miss anything? Let me know down below and leave a suggestion for a villain you'd like to see featured while you're at it. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. A big thank you to all of my subscribers, my patrons, my members, anyone who's decided to honor me with a super thank, and especially Elijah Kai VA and Effigy, our Dark Lord channel members, and a most vile thank you to those whose names you're seeing on screen now. Join the channel's Discord server and subreddit to interact with myself and the community, and follow me on the social media platforms listed below to keep up with the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon.